The arrival of the broken, the desperate flight, the darkness between stars held many secrets, but on this cold morning in March 2187, it revealed something humanity had never seen before. A wound in space itself tore open near the Kuiper Belt, and through it tumbled a fleet of vessels that looked like they had crawled through hell itself. 17 ships emerged from the rupture, their hulls scorched black and bleeding atmosphere from 100 different breaches. They moved in a tight formation, protecting something precious at their center. Their engines flickered with dying light, barely enough to keep them moving forward. These were not explorers or merchants arriving with curiosity and trade goods. These were survivors. Lieutenant Sarah Domingo sat at her monitoring station aboard the UTDF Vigilance, a patrol cruiser that had been conducting routine sweeps of the outer system. Her coffee went cold in her hand as her screen suddenly lit up with contact alerts. For 3 seconds she could only stare, then training took over. Captain Rodriguez, we have multiple unknown contacts emerging at coordinates 77 Mark 38. 17 vessels, heavily damaged, no weapons hot. Engines critical. Her voice stayed steady despite her racing heart. Captain Maria Rodriguez moved to stand behind her station, eyes scanning the data. 20 years of service had taught her to read situations quickly. These ships were dying, and whoever was aboard them had run out of options. Hail them on all standard frequencies. Let's find out who they are before we do anything else. Rodriguez kept her hand near the alert button but didn't press it. Not yet. The response came in fragments, a voice struggling through static and interference. The universal translator worked overtime, piecing together meaning from alien syntax and desperate urgency. This is Theranul of the Calthera Exodus Fleet. We carry 23,000 civilians, no weapons. We seek mercy, sanctuary, please. The transmission died. One of the alien ships had just lost its communications array in a spray of sparks, visible even from this distance. Rodriguez felt something tighten in her chest. She had children. Grandchildren. She knew the sound of a parent trying to save their young. Send immediate medical and engineering support. Alert Mars Command that we have a first contact situation with potential refugees. And get me a direct line to Earth Defense Council. They need to see this. The weight of decision 3 hours later, the holographic chamber beneath Geneva hummed with activity. The Earth Defense Council had assembled an emergency session, with representatives appearing from every continent and major orbital station. The Calthera ships now floated under human guard, their life support failing by the minute. Admiral Chen Yuki stood at the center of the chamber, her silver hair tied back in a tight bun, her uniform crisp despite the late hour in Beijing. She had fought in the Martian independence conflict and negotiated peace with the Jovian mining collectives. She knew the cost of every decision. The situation is clear, she began, her voice carrying to every corner of the chamber. The Calthera are refugees fleeing what they describe as systematic extermination. Their pursuers, the Xhkar supremacy, destroyed 4 of their worlds over the past 6 months. These 17 ships are all that remain of a civilization of billions. Ambassador David Okafor from the African Union leaned forward. And the Xhkar? What do we know about them? Very little. The Calthera had limited contact with other species before the attack. What we do know is concerning. The Xhkar appear to be a militaristic empire that views other species as inferior and expendable. They have conquered at least 15 known worlds in the past decade. Council member Jiang Wei from the Asian Economic Zone spoke up. If we grant asylum, we risk drawing this Xhkar supremacy's attention to Earth. We have just achieved unity as a species. Are we ready to face an interstellar war? The chamber fell silent. It was the question everyone was thinking but afraid to speak aloud. Dr. James Okonkwo, chief xenobiologist and newly appointed diplomatic liaison, stepped forward. He had spent the past 2 hours aboard one of the Calthera ships, and what he had seen still burned in his mind. Council members, I have just returned from the Calthera flagship. I walked through corridors filled with families who have lost everything. I met children who watched their homes burn from orbit. I spoke with engineers who are using their own bodies to plug hull breaches because they've run out of materials. He paused, letting his words sink in. The question before us is not whether we can afford to help them. The question is whether we can afford not to. What kind of species do we want to be when we step onto the galactic stage? Governor Sarah Kamani from the Luna Territories stood. Her voice was firm. My people voted unanimously within the hour. We have space on Luna, on Titan, on Europa. We have resources. We have the means to help. The only thing we lack is the will. One by one, the council members indicated their positions. The debate lasted another hour, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. Humanity had spent centuries fighting itself, learning hard lessons about compassion, unity, and the cost of indifference. Those lessons would not be forgotten now. Admiral Chen called for the final vote. The result was overwhelming. By authority of the Earth Defense Council, the United Terran Defense Force is hereby authorized to grant full asylum to the Kelthera people. All necessary resources will be allocated for their care and protection. Sanctuaries embrace within 24 hours. The transformation began. The Kelthera fleet was escorted into the inner system. Human engineering teams swarming over their damaged vessels like antibodies fighting an infection. On Titan, Europa, and Ganymede, temporary habitats expanded to accommodate the refugees. Dr. Okonkwo stood in the primary receiving area on Europa Station, watching as the first Kelthera families disembarked. They were taller than humans, with luminescent skin that shifted through subtle shades of blue and purple. Their faces were elongated, with large eyes that seemed to hold ancient sorrow. They moved with grace despite their obvious exhaustion and fear. Theranal was among the first to step onto the station. She had been a teacher before the war, responsible for educating young Kelthera in the arts and philosophy. Now she led what remained of her people, a burden she had never wanted but could not refuse. When she saw Dr. Okonkwo waiting, she stopped. For a moment, human and Kelthera simply looked at each other, two species separated by evolution and light years, connected by something deeper than biology. "Welcome to Europa," Okonkwo said softly. "You're safe now." Theranal's legs gave out. She didn't collapse so much as carefully lower herself to her knees, her shoulders shaking with sobs that had been held back for months. Around her, other Kelthera did the same, the weight of survival finally releasing its grip. Human volunteers moved forward, not with pity, but with understanding. They offered blankets, water, and something more valuable than either, presence. They sat with the Kelthera, held their hands, and simply existed beside them in their grief. Commander Lysera, one of the few Kelthera military survivors, watched this with confusion. She had served in her people's defense fleet for 20 years before the Shkar came. She had seen combat, strategy, and the cold calculus of survival. But this gentleness from a species they had just met, it made no tactical sense. A young human woman, maybe 20 years old, approached Lysera with a cup of something warm. "Tea," the human said. "It helps. I'm Emma, by the way. I'm a medical student from Sao Paulo." Lysera took the cup with hands that still trembled from piloting a damaged ship for 3 months straight. "Why are you here? Why risk yourselves for us?" Emma smiled, and in that smile was something Lysera had thought extinct in the universe: uncomplicated kindness. "Because you needed help. That's all the reason anyone needs." The bond of shared stories. Over the following weeks, something remarkable happened. The Kelthera began to heal, not just physically but spiritually. Human doctors worked alongside Kelthera medical practitioners, learning alien biology while teaching human techniques. Children from both species played together in the recreation areas, inventing games that needed no translation. In the communal dining halls, Kelthera and humans shared meals and stories. Theranal discovered that human cuisine involved an astonishing variety of spices and flavors. In return, she taught human chefs how to prepare keltha, a traditional grain dish that glowed faintly when properly prepared. Dr. Okonkwo spent hours each day learning the Kelthera language directly from Theranal, bypassing the translators to understand the nuances of their culture. He learned that the Kelthera had a concept called Shelvara, which roughly translated to the responsibility of the strong to shelter the weak. It was a philosophical cornerstone of their civilization. "We tried to live by Shelvara," Theranal explained one evening as they sat in the observation lounge, Earth's blue marble visible in the distance. "When the Shkar came, we thought we could negotiate, find common ground. We offered them trade, technology, cultural exchange. We believed that any species capable of building starships must also be capable of compassion." "What happened?" Okonkwo asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "They laughed at us. They said compassion was weakness, that the strong take what they want, and the weak exist only to serve or die." Her skin flickered darker, betraying her emotion. "They destroyed our primary world as a demonstration. 2 billion souls gone in an afternoon. After that, all we could do was run. Okonkwo was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "The Shkar are wrong. Compassion isn't weakness. It's the hardest thing any species can choose because it means accepting risk for others. But it's also the only thing that makes us worth saving." Terranol looked at him with those large ancient eyes. "Your people understand this? We learned it the hard way. We fought ourselves for thousands of years before we finally figured it out. A lot of good people died teaching us that lesson." He met her gaze steadily. "But we learned. And we won't forget." The warning it was Commander Lysiara who first noticed the anomalies in the long-range sensor data. She had volunteered to work with the human defense monitoring teams, her military experience making her valuable despite the language barriers and different technologies. She found Admiral Chen in the command center of Mars Defense Station, a massive orbital platform bristling with weapons and sensors that monitored everything entering or leaving the solar system. "Admiral, I need you to look at these readings." Lysara's voice carried an edge that made Chen immediately focus. The display showed gravitational distortions at the edge of the solar system, in the space between the Kuiper Belt and the Oort cloud. Subtle, easily mistaken for natural phenomena, but Lysara had seen these patterns before. The Shkar use a form of faster-than-light travel that creates specific gravitational signatures. These readings match what we detected before they attacked our worlds. She looked at Chen with eyes that had witnessed genocide. "They're coming." Chen felt her blood run cold, but her expression remained calm. She had commanded fleets in crisis before. Panic served no one. "How long do we have?" "Based on the signature strength and dissipation rate, 3 days, maybe 4 if we're lucky." Chen activated the priority communication channel to Earth Defense Council. "This is Admiral Chen. Initiate Protocol Sanctuary Shield. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill." Across human space, alert signals began to sound. Shipyards that had been quietly building new vessels kicked into overdrive. Defense platforms that had been hidden in asteroid fields powered up their systems. Military personnel recalled from leave reported to their stations. The Kelthera, watching this mobilization, felt a mixture of hope and horror. Hope that they might finally have found protectors. Horror that they had brought death to the species that had shown them nothing but kindness. Theranol found Dr. Okonkwo in his quarters, preparing to evacuate to a secure location as all civilian personnel had been ordered to do. "This is our fault," she said, her voice breaking. "We brought them here. We should leave, draw them away from you." Okonkwo turned to face her. "Where would you go? Your ships are barely functional. Your people are exhausted. And even if you could leave," he stepped closer, "we wouldn't let you. You're under our protection now. That means something to us. But you could all die because of us." "Maybe," Okonkwo admitted, "but we'll die as humans, standing between bullies and the people they want to hurt. I can't think of a better reason to fight. The ultimatum." The message arrived exactly when Lysara had predicted. It was broadcast on every frequency, in multiple languages, clearly intended to be heard by both the Kelthera and their human hosts. A figure appeared on screens across the solar system. It was humanoid in the broadest sense, but there the similarity ended. The Shkar ambassador, if that was the correct term, was covered in chitinous armor that seemed to be part of its biology. Its eyes glowed red, and its mouth revealed rows of crystalline teeth when it spoke. "Humans of Earth. This is War Master Krelthor of the Shkar Supremacy. You harbor enemies of the Supremacy. You have 48 hours to surrender all Kelthera individuals to our custody. If you comply, you will be spared. If you refuse, you will be destroyed. There will be no negotiation. There will be no mercy. Choose wisely." The transmission ended. Silence filled the command center where Admiral Chen and her senior staff had watched. Then Chen smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "Lieutenant Park, prepare a response transmission. Make sure it reaches their fleet and is also broadcast on all public channels. Humanity should hear what we're about to say." She stood before the camera, her posture perfect, her expression calm but utterly unyielding. "War Master Krelthor, this is Admiral Chen Yuki of the United Terran Defense Force, speaking for all humanity. We have reviewed your demand. Our response is as follows. No, the Kelthera are under Earth's protection. They have committed no crimes against humanity or any other species. They are refugees fleeing genocide, and we will not surrender them to their murderers. If you wish to harm them, you will have to go through us. We have 48 hours, you say? Then I suggest you spend that time considering whether you truly want to find out what humans do when someone threatens those we've sworn to protect. Chen out. The transmission ended. Around her, the command staff erupted in cheers that quickly turned to focused determination. They had just defied an empire. Now they had to prove they could back up those words. In the Kelthera quarters on Europa, Theranal watched the transmission with tears streaming down her luminescent cheeks. Around her, other Kelthera stood in stunned silence. They had spent months believing they were alone in the universe, that compassion had died with their worlds. In one 45-second transmission, a species they had just met had proven them wrong. Commander Lysara found Theranal there, both of them watching as human ships began moving into defensive formations across the system. "They're really going to fight for us," Lysara whispered. "Yes," Theranal replied, "and we will remember this for as long as our species exists. Whatever happens in the next 2 days, the universe will know what humanity did here." Admiral Chen stood at the viewport of Mars Defense Station, watching the preparations continue. Supply ships raced between stations. Fighter wings ran through combat drills. Engineers made final adjustments to weapons that Earth had hoped it would never need to use. Somewhere beyond Neptune, the Xhkar fleet was approaching. 500 warships according to long-range scans, an armada designed to crush resistance and terrorize survivors. But they had never faced humans before. They didn't know about the wars humanity had fought against itself, the lessons learned in blood and fire. They didn't know about the stubborn refusal to surrender that was written into human DNA. They didn't know that humanity had a saying, "We do not abandon our own." And the Kelthera were human now, in all the ways that mattered. Chen turned from the viewport and walked back to her command station. Around her, officers worked with focused intensity. The fear was there, she could see it in their eyes. But so was something stronger, determination. "All stations, this is Admiral Chen. In approximately 43 hours, the Xhkar fleet will arrive. They expect us to break. They expect us to surrender innocent people to save ourselves. They're about to learn why that was a mistake. Make no mistake, this will be the hardest fight any of us have ever faced. But we're not fighting for territory or resources. We're fighting for people who asked us for nothing more than a chance to survive. We're fighting because it's right, because it's what humans do. Man your stations, check your weapons, say your prayers if you have them, and get ready to show the galaxy what happens when you threaten those under Earth's shield." Chen out. The countdown had begun. Humanity was going to war. The storm meets the shield. The Armada arrives. The Xhkar fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel like a plague of metal locusts descending upon a harvest. 500 warships materialized at Neptune's orbit, their hulls painted in the crimson and black of the supremacy. Each vessel was a weapon designed for one purpose: total annihilation. Warmaster Krelthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominance, a dreadnought 3 kilometers long and bristling with plasma cannons. Around him, his officers worked in silent efficiency, their chitinous fingers dancing across controls that hummed with lethal power. "Status report," Krelthor commanded, his voice like grinding stone. "All vessels in formation, Warmaster. The human defensive line is detected at Neptune's outer orbit. Preliminary scans show approximately 80 vessels. Pathetic resistance." The tactical officer's mandibles clicked in what passed for Xhkar laughter. Krelthor studied the display with cold calculation. 80 ships against 500. The humans had to know this was suicide. Perhaps they would see reason at the last moment. Perhaps they would finally understand that defiance was futile. Open a channel to the human commander. Let us give them one final opportunity to avoid extinction. The channel opened. Admiral Chen appeared on the screen, standing calmly on the bridge of her flagship, the UTDF Prometheus. Behind her, human officers worked with focused determination. There was no panic in their eyes. "Only readiness, Warmaster Krelthor," Chen said evenly. "You've arrived precisely on schedule." "I respect punctuality," Krelthor's eyes narrowed. The human was mocking him. "Admiral Chen, your sensors must inform you of the futility of resistance. 500 warships stand before you. You have hours to surrender the Kelthera vermin, or we will sweep through your system like fire through dead grass. This is your final warning." Chen smiled, and it was the smile of someone holding cards their opponent couldn't see. "Warmaster, you've made a fundamental error. You assumed you were facing 80 ships. Let me correct that misunderstanding. She made a small gesture. Across the solar system, stealth fields deactivated. Krelthor's tactical display exploded with new contacts. Ships emerged from what he had thought was empty space. They had been hiding in asteroid fields behind moons, within planetary rings and in the magnetic shadows of gas giants. Not 80 ships. 347. But more than that, defense platforms came online. Massive orbital fortresses hidden for decades as mining stations revealed their true purpose. Neptune itself was surrounded by a ring of weapons platforms, each one capable of projecting shields and firing kinetic accelerators that could punch through a battleship. What you see before you, War Master, is the Sol Defense Network. We've been building it for 80 years, hoping we'd never need it. You've given us a reason. Chen's smile vanished, replaced by an expression of cold steel. You want the Kelthera? Come and take them. The channel closed. For the first time in his 30 years of military service, War Master Krelthor felt something he had thought beneath him. Uncertainty. First blood. The Xkar fleet advanced in standard formation, confident that numbers would carry the day. Their plasma weapons charged, filling space with electromagnetic distortion. They had destroyed worlds with these weapons. They had shattered fleets 3 times the size of humanity's defense force. Admiral Chen watched their approach from the command center of the Prometheus. Around her, holographic displays showed every ship, every platform, every weapon system under her command. All ships, this is Prometheus Actual, execute Solomon Protocol. Show them why you don't corner humans. The Solomon Protocol was humanity's answer to overwhelming force. Controlled chaos. Human ships didn't hold formation. They scattered like startled fish, breaking into squadron-level units that moved with independent authority. Frigates dove toward the Neptunian rings. Destroyers accelerated to velocities that should have torn them apart. Cruisers rolled perpendicular to the plane of battle, presenting smaller profiles. The Xkar fired first. Plasma bolts crossed the void, beautiful and deadly. Painting space in shades of violet and crimson, they should have torn through human vessels like paper. Instead, the bolts scattered against defensive fields that bent physics in ways the Xkar had never encountered. Earth had studied every particle interaction, every force of nature for centuries. Those studies had produced shields that didn't just absorb energy, they redirected it. All batteries return fire. Target their forward scouts. Let's see how tough they really are. Human weapons were different from anything the Xkar had faced. Railguns hurled tungsten rods at relativistic speeds. Missile pods released swarms of micro-munitions that thought for themselves. And the experimental systems, the ones Earth had tested but never deployed in actual combat, came online with results that exceeded projections. The first Xkar cruiser to die never saw what killed it. A railgun slug moving at 0.3 C punched through its shields, its armor, and its reactor in the same microsecond. The ship came apart like a supernova, debris expanding in a perfect sphere of destruction. 3 more died in the following seconds. Then 7 more. The Xkar formation wavered. They're adapting their shields, reported Commander Lisa Torres from her tactical station. Rotating frequencies to counter our railguns, Chen nodded. She had expected that. Phase 2. Deploy the lances. From hidden positions in the Kuiper Belt, 6 enormous vessels emerged. They were barely ships in the traditional sense, more like mobile weapons platforms built around a single devastating system. The lance arrays, humanity's answer to the question, what if we made lightning we could aim? The lances fired. Coherent beams of accelerated particles crossed millions of kilometers in heartbeats, invisible until they struck. When they hit, they didn't just damage, they unmade. Molecular bonds shattered. Matter reverted to plasma. Xkar ships simply ceased to exist, leaving behind clouds of ionized gas. War Master Krelthor watched his fleet take casualties for the first time in the campaign. 15 ships gone in less than 3 minutes. The humans fought like nothing he had encountered before. No honor, no rigid tactics, just pure aggressive innovation. All vessels concentrated fire on those lance platforms. Crush them before they... A human destroyer appeared on his view screen, accelerating directly toward the Eternal Dominance. It was tiny compared to his dreadnought, barely a tenth the size. Its shields were failing, its hull was breached, and it was venting atmosphere. It was also moving at combat speed on a collision course. Evasive action. Krelthor roared. The Eternal Dominance tried to turn, but dreadnoughts were not built for agility. The destroyer struck the flagship's starboard side, its reactor deliberately overloading on impact. The explosion tore a kilometer-long gash in the dreadnought's armor. On Europa Station, the Kelthera watched the battle on screens that showed every moment of the conflict. They saw human ships dying, saw crews sacrificing themselves to take down larger enemy vessels, saw tactics that traded lives for strategic advantage. Theranel watched with a hand pressed to her chest, feeling each human death as if it were her own people dying again. "They're giving everything for us," she whispered. Commander Lysara stood beside her, her military training allowing her to see the battle with different eyes. "Not just for us. They're fighting for a principle. The idea that the strong should protect the weak, that civilization means something more than just survival." She paused. "We called it Shelvara. They don't have a word for it. They just do it." The turning point 4 hours into the battle, the Shkar fleet had been reduced to 420 ships. The humans had lost 37 vessels. The mathematics still favored the supremacy, but the cost was far higher than Krelthor had anticipated. "Warmaster, recommend we withdraw and request additional forces," his strategic advisor suggested. "Negative. We commit the reserve assault wave. Break their line at Jupiter. Once we're past their defensive perimeter, we can strike at their inhabited worlds directly. Fear will accomplish what force cannot." The reserve wave was 200 fresh ships that had been held back for exactly this purpose. They accelerated past Neptune, heading for Jupiter where human forces were thinner. It was sound strategy. Overwhelming one point, creating a breach, then exploiting it. Admiral Chen saw the maneuver developing. "They're going for Jupiter. Contact Mars Defense Command. Tell Admiral Zhao to execute Thunderhead." At Jupiter orbit, Admiral Zhao commanded the second human defensive line from the bridge of the UTDF Defiance. He was younger than Chen, but he had cut his teeth fighting pirates in the Belt Wars. He knew how to make every shot count. "All ships, pull back to Jupiter's magnetic field. Let them think we're retreating." The human ships withdrew and the Shkar reserve wave accelerated harder, smelling victory. They entered Jupiter's powerful magnetic field, their sensors momentarily disrupted by the electromagnetic chaos. That was when the trap closed. Hidden in Jupiter's rings were not just ships, but weapons humanity had hoped would never be necessary. Electromagnetic pulse generators, scaled up to planetary proportions powered by Jupiter's own magnetic field. When they activated, they released a pulse that made solar flares look gentle by comparison. Jakar ships lost power. Their shields collapsed. Their weapons went offline. For 15 seconds, 200 warships were dead in space, vulnerable and blind. Human ships, hardened against electromagnetic interference and operating with backup systems, moved in with brutal efficiency. It wasn't a battle. It was an execution. "Cease fire," Admiral Zhao commanded as the last Shkar vessel in the kill zone went dark. "Broadcast surrender terms on all frequencies. Tell them they can live if they stand down." Of the 200 ships in the reserve wave, 63 accepted the surrender terms. The rest chose to fight with whatever backup systems they could restore. None survived the choice. Warmaster Krelthor watched his fleet disintegrate. 400 ships to 300, 300 to 200. The humans fought with a creativity that bordered on insanity. They used their own ships as weapons. They turned planets into traps. They sacrificed pawns to capture queens and did it with a precision that suggested they had planned for exactly this scenario. "Warmaster, we've lost fleet cohesion. Multiple squadrons requesting permission to withdraw." Krelthor's mandibles ground together in fury. He had never retreated. The supremacy did not retreat. But he was not a fool. He could recognize a superior enemy when he faced one. Order all remaining vessels to fall back to Neptune's outer orbit. Maintain defensive formation. Contact the Supremacy High Command. Tell them, the words tasted like poison. Tell them we require reinforcements. The cost of victory on the bridge of the Prometheus, Admiral Chen allowed herself a moment of relief as the Shkar fleet withdrew. Around her, officers cheered, exhaustion momentarily forgotten in the rush of survival. But Chen didn't cheer. She was looking at the casualty reports. 37 ships destroyed, 14,000 personnel dead, 23,000 more wounded, and the Shkar fleet, while bloodied, was still intact with over 200 operational warships. "Get me damage assessments from all surviving vessels. Priority repairs on anything that can be combat ready within 12 hours. And someone get me a line to the Shkar flagship." The channel opened. Krelthor appeared, his armor scorched, his expression one of barely controlled rage. You fight well, human, but this changes nothing. The Supremacy has thousands of ships. We will return with more, many more. Chen met his gaze without flinching. Then we'll be waiting. And every time you come, we'll send you back with fewer ships than you arrived with. We're not going anywhere, War Master. This is our home. These are our people now. You want them? This is what it costs. Every single time. Krelthor studied her for a long moment. Then he said something that surprised them both. I have fought for 30 years. I have conquered 15 worlds. I have never met an enemy like you. It wasn't quite respect, but it was close. This is not over, Admiral Chen. No, Chen agreed. But now you know what you're facing. The question is whether the Supremacy wants to keep paying the price. The channel closed. Dr. Okonkwo found Chen an hour later, standing at a viewport and staring out at the debris field that marked the battle. Human and Shkar wreckage drifted together in death, a memorial to the cost of principles. We won, Okonkwo said quietly. Did we? Chen gestured to the wreckage. 14,000 people died today, James. 14,000 families just got the worst news of their lives. We held the line, yes. We protected the Kelthera, but I'm not sure victory is the right word. What would you call it? Chen was quiet for a moment. Necessity. We did what we had to do. That doesn't make it glorious. It just makes it necessary. Seeds of alliance. In the weeks following the battle, something remarkable happened. The Kelthera, who had always been traders and philosophers, showed humanity what they truly valued: knowledge. Theranal met with Admiral Chen in a conference room aboard Mars Defense Station. Between them floated holographic displays of technology, art, history, and science. Our worlds are gone, Theranal said, but our knowledge survives. It is all we have left to give, and we give it freely to those who saved us. The technology was extraordinary. Kelthera shield systems that could be integrated with human designs, medical techniques that could extend human lifespans by decades, energy generation methods that were cleaner and more efficient than anything Earth had developed. But more than technology, they shared something deeper: perspective. Commander Lissara worked with human military strategists, sharing centuries of Kelthera tactical knowledge, but she also shared their mistakes, the errors that had left them vulnerable to the Shkar. We believed that if we remained peaceful, others would respect that peace, she told a room full of human officers. We were wrong. Peace is not the absence of weapons. It is the presence of justice defended by those willing to fight for it. You humans understand this in a way we never did. Dr. Okonkwo spent days with Kelthera historians, learning about their civilization's rise and fall. What he learned changed his perspective on humanity's place in the galaxy. They had 3,000 years of continuous peace, he told Admiral Chen over coffee one evening. 3,000 years without major conflict. They built wonders, created art that could make you weep, developed philosophy that answered questions we're still asking. And then the Shkar came, and all of that wasn't enough to save them. What's your point? Chen asked. My point is that civilization is fragile. It needs both creation and protection. The Kelthera were builders without warriors. The Shkar are warriors without builders. Maybe humanity's strength is that we're both. We create beauty and we defend it. We dream of peace and we prepare for war. Chen nodded slowly. We're both because we had to be. Because we fought ourselves for so long that we learned both sides of the equation. Exactly. And maybe that's what we can offer the galaxy. Not just military strength, but the wisdom to know when to use it and when to put it aside. The message spreads. The news of the Battle of Neptune spread across the galaxy faster than light itself. Every species with FTL communication heard the same story. A young species called humanity had faced down the Shkar supremacy and won. On distant worlds, slaves of the supremacy heard the news and whispered it in secret. On trading stations, merchants shared recordings of the battle that had been captured by automated probes. In the corridors of power on 100 different worlds, leaders reconsidered their positions. One of those leaders was Ambassador Vekthar of the Mycelian Collective, a fungoid species that had submitted to Shkar dominance rather than face extinction. He contacted Earth through back channels, his message encrypted and carefully worded. Humans of Earth, we have heard of your victory. We have seen what you did for the Kelthera. There are dozens of species like ours living under Shkar rule, waiting for someone strong enough to stand against them. You may have started something larger than you realize. Admiral Chen read the message with mixed emotions. Pride that humanity had proven itself, fear of what they had just invited into their future, and determination to see it through. Draft a response, she told her communication officer. Tell Ambassador Vekthar that Earth stands ready to discuss alliance with any species seeking freedom from oppression. But make it clear we're not conquerors. We're not building an empire. We're offering partnership. The response was sent. Within days, more messages arrived. Species that had been silent for centuries suddenly found their voices. The galaxy was waking up, and humanity had just become the alarm clock. New beginnings on Europa Station. Human and Kelthera children played together in the recreation areas that had been expanded and improved. The young ones adapted faster than their parents, finding common ground in games and laughter that needed no translation. Emma, the medical student from Sao Paulo, had become close friends with a young Kelthera named Shaolin. They sat together in the observation lounge, watching Jupiter's storms rage in the distance. Do you think our peoples will always be together now? Shaolin asked in careful English. I think so, Emma replied. We fought together. We bled together. That creates bonds that don't break easily. On my world, before the Xkar came, we had a saying. The tree that stands alone breaks in the storm, but the forest bends and survives. I think humans and Kelthera are becoming a forest. Emma smiled. I like that. A forest growing together, protecting each other. In the military planning rooms, Admiral Chen and Commander Lissara worked on joint defense protocols. The Xkar would return, probably within a year with reinforcements. Earth needed to be ready. Your tactics are brilliant but costly, Lissara observed. You sacrifice pieces to win the board. It works, but at such a price. What would you suggest? Chen asked, genuinely curious. Combine your aggressive tactics with Kelthera defensive technology. Our shields are superior. Our sensors have longer range. But we never had your willingness to take risks, to innovate in the moment. Together we could create something neither species could achieve alone. Chen extended her hand. Then let's build that together. Partners, not protectors, and protected. Lissara gripped the offered hand, sealing an alliance that would reshape both their peoples. The promised 3 months after the battle, a memorial was unveiled on Mars. It stood on Olympus Mons, visible from orbit, a towering structure of human steel and Kelthera crystal that caught the light and split it into rainbows. On it were inscribed the names of every human who had died defending the Kelthera. 14,000 names, each one a story, a family, a life given for strangers. Beneath the names, in both English and Kelthera script, were simple words. They stood between the weak and the storm. They answered cruelty with courage. They proved that civilization means more than survival. It means choosing to be better than the darkness. In memory of those who made that choice, Admiral Chen stood before the memorial with Theranal, both of them silent as the Martian wind howled around them. We can never repay this debt, Theranal said softly. You don't have to, Chen replied. You already have. You reminded us why we unified in the first place, why we stopped fighting each other and started looking outward. You gave us purpose. What purpose is that? Chen looked up at the memorial, at those 14,000 names glinting in the red Martian sunlight. To be the people who say no when bullies come calling. To be the ones who stand up, even when it's hard, even when it costs us. To prove that compassion and strength aren't opposites, they're partners. Theranal's skin shifted through shades of blue, the Kelthera expression of deep emotion. The Xkar will come back. They won't forgive this defeat. I know, Chen said, and we'll be waiting. But next time they'll be facing humans and Kelthera together, and whoever else wants to stand with us. She turned to face Theranal. We're not alone anymore. None of us are. Across the solar system, construction continued. New ships, new defenses, new technologies born from the marriage of human innovation and Kelthera wisdom. Children of both species learned together. Scientists collaborated on problems neither could solve alone. Warriors trained side by side, learning each other's strengths. And on distant worlds, slaves looked up at the stars and whispered a name that had become synonymous with hope. Humanity. The storm would come again. The Xkar supremacy would return with more ships, more weapons, more fury. But they would find something they had never encountered before. A galaxy that had learned to fight back. Because humanity had answered a simple plea for sanctuary, with something the galaxy had forgotten was possible. Kindness backed by courage, compassion armed with determination, and the unshakable belief that the strong existed to protect the weak. The Kelthera had sought refuge. Humanity had brought hope, and together, they had built something that would echo through the ages. Proof that civilization was worth fighting for. Dr. Okonkwo stood in his office late one night, finishing his report on first contact with the Kelthara. He had written thousands of words, analyzed every aspect of their culture, their biology, their technology. But as he prepared to submit the report, he deleted everything and wrote a single sentence. "We have found what humanity has always needed, a reason to be our best selves." The Kelthera reminded us that the measure of a civilization is not how it treats the strong, but how it protects the weak. May we never forget this lesson. He submitted the report and looked out his window at Europa's icy surface. Somewhere out there, Kelthera and human children were playing together, building friendships that would last lifetimes. And somewhere beyond the stars, the Jakar supremacy was gathering its forces, preparing for the next battle. Let them come, Okonkwo thought. Let them see what humans become when we have something worth fighting for. The galaxy was changing, and at the heart of that change stood two species who had found in each other what they both needed most: partnership, purpose, and proof that kindness was not weakness, it was the strongest force in the universe. The story of humanity and the Kelthera was just beginning. But already, it was being told on 1,000 worlds in 100 languages, all saying the same thing. They pleaded for sanctuary. Humanity answered with kindness and an armada, and the universe would never be the same.